3 months into dating him, I discovered his entire life was a lie. I've suspected my boyfriend's story wasn't true pretty much since I met him. And I feel awful saying that, because what kind of person hears, my biological parents and brother died in a house fire? Nobody wanted me. I was abandoned at an airport in another country. And I was eventually adopted and goes, seems statistically unlikely. Apparently me. But I didn't actually question him, because it was traumatic. It was sad. And he clearly wasn't telling it for fun, or so I thought. His story was that he was from the US. His parents and brother died in a house fire. No relatives wanted him. And he ended up abandoned at an airport here when he was 11. He was adopted by the people who are now his parents when he was 12. Awful. Absolutely awful. So I just accepted it. Then yesterday we were visiting his parents. His mother started talking about him as a kid, which immediately made me go, wait, because this story she was telling was about him when he was younger than 12. And I know what you're thinking. Maybe she's talking about a different period. No, I knew the timeline. I just didn't want to be the asshole who sat there cross-examining someone's mother over childhood anecdotes. So I started asking little questions. Oh wow, how old was he then? Oh, where were you living? Was he already here? Very casual. Very normal. Definitely not me internally putting together a murder board. My boyfriend had gone completely silent. Like, completely silent. His mother kept talking. And the more she talked, the more I realized the story did not fit his story. Eventually, we left. We got into the car. I didn't say anything. I figured I'd let him explain it. About 5 minutes into the drive, he finally goes, I hate it when they do that. I said, do what? Fabricate my mother's stories and tell them as if they were their own. Okay, sure. What? I asked where they got the stories. Her diary. Where's the diary? In a bank box in the Capitol? I just stared out the window. Of course it is. Obviously. The secret diary of the dead biological mother, locked in a bank box in the Capitol. Why would life ever simply be normal? I asked him why his parents would do this. He said they didn't want people to know he was adopted. And I said, there's no point in lying to me about that. Obviously, I would have been told. And he just went, yes, well. I hate yes, well. It's such a suspicious little phrase. It's what people say when their explanation has quietly walked into traffic. Then I said, I did notice your mother never actually mentioned herself in that story. He immediately goes, yes, see? And that was basically the end of the conversation. I was quiet for the rest of the drive. Because honestly, I'd always thought his story was bullshit. Not because I thought he was bullshit. The story. It was just too much. Every part of it was tragic. It was like someone had asked, how can we make this childhood sadder? And then kept adding things until everyone started crying. But I never challenged it, because if someone tells you something that traumatic, you don't exactly respond with, could you provide documentation? So before I got out of the car, I told him, I'd love you even if your parents were telling the truth. And I meant it. I told him I cared about him regardless. Then he went to work. When he came home, he finally told me the truth, or what I thought was the truth. He showed me his birth certificate. He showed me photographs. He told me he wasn't adopted. His parents were his biological parents. He wasn't from the US. His parents and brother hadn't died in a house fire. He hadn't been abandoned at an airport. Apparently, he'd been kicked out of his house, or run away when he was 15, and lived in a friend's basement for about 6 months. There had been talk about getting CPS involved, so he lied. And then the lie just grew and grew and grew. He'd changed his traditional name to an English one when he was 21. He'd told people that his adoptive parents had forcibly renamed him when they brought him here, and he'd eventually taken his original name back. In reality, he'd been born and raised in the same city as me. We speak English together because he says it makes him more comfortable. Apparently, he told his family he changed his name because he didn't like it. 10 years. 10 years. I was sitting there thinking, okay. This is insane. But maybe this is one of those things that started as a lie when he was 15 and then got completely out of control. Maybe he was ashamed. Maybe he was scared. Maybe he developed some horrible coping mechanism. I don't know. I still loved him. I told him that. I told him none of this changed the fact that he was kind, hardworking, caring, and the person I'd known for years. But I told him he needed to see a psychiatrist, like immediately. And yes, he agreed. He said he'd go. So I went home thinking maybe we'd actually get through this. Then someone pointed out that his new story didn't make much sense either. And I thought, oh, fuck. Because my gut had been bothering me for years. And when your gut has been quietly tapping you on the shoulder for years, maybe eventually you should stop telling it to shut up. So the next day I went to see him, and I asked him directly, is there anything else you've lied to me about? He said no, nothing he could think of, which is honestly hilarious in retrospect. So I helped him. I started naming things I'd always had little doubts about. And suddenly we were playing the world's worst version of 2 truths and a lie, except apparently everything was a lie. He told me he'd been sent to Afghanistan during his army service. Never happened. He told me he owned part of a small business importing cognac. Nope. His dad did. He told me he and his brother bought their parents' house. Nope. He helped his parents put down the floors. That's it. The 3 cars he supposedly owned? No, he didn't own them. One he'd supposedly bought for his dad. One for his brother. No, again. Then there was the wine. On our 3rd date, he served me this bottle of red wine and told me it was incredibly expensive and amazing. This became one of our cute little early relationship stories. I eventually told him I didn't even like red wine. Turns out it was just a nice bottle his dad had bought on holiday. At this point, I was almost impressed. Not in a good way. Just mechanically, like watching someone successfully lie about something so pointless that you start wondering if they're doing it recreationally. And then he told me about his ex. The stalker, the stabbing. This was one of the first stories he'd ever told me. He'd said she stalked him, eventually stabbed him in the lower stomach, and that he was inches from dying. He'd told me all these horrible details. He repeated the story to me, to my friends, to his friends. It was horrifying. Now, apparently she did stalk him. Apparently she did stab him, but it was a flesh wound, and he never reported it. I just sat there, because what the fuck do you even say to that? Thanks for clarifying your attempted murder. I was done. Completely done. I'm at my friend's house now. I'm a little hungover, which is probably appropriate, because apparently the only reasonable response to discovering that your boyfriend has spent 10 years inventing his biography is alcohol and carbohydrates. I had to drive over this morning to get my work uniform and the rest of my things. He keeps telling me we don't have to break up. He loves me. He's going to change. He's going to get therapy. He's going to tell everyone the truth. And maybe he will. I hope he does. I genuinely do. But I'm not staying to watch, because I don't want to spend the next 5 years wondering whether every sentence coming out of his mouth has been edited for dramatic effect. And I don't want to buy a house with someone when I have to wonder whether the person telling me the square footage is also going to invent the previous owner. I'm still learning things. There are apparently more. I don't even know how there can be more. At this point, I'm waiting for him to tell me he was secretly a Formula One driver. I wouldn't even be surprised. And that's the worst part. I don't know what's true anymore. I don't know how much of our relationship was real. I know I loved him. I know I cared about him. I know there were things about him that were genuinely good. But trust isn't just believing the big things. It's believing the boring things. It's believing the stupid little things. It's being able to hear your partner say, I bought this wine on holiday, and not immediately think, did you? So no, I'm not giving him another chance. Maybe he can change. Maybe therapy will help. Maybe one day he'll be able to tell the truth without having to build an entire fictional backstory first, but I'm not going to be there for the sequel. I've already seen enough. And honestly, I would like my next relationship to have fewer plot twists. Maybe even zero. I'm setting the bar incredibly low. I'd like a man whose biography doesn't require footnotes.